Simon in Basingstoke, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ali. I think you're almost correct in how you've diagnosed this, but I think before we massively increase defence spending, we need to basically rebuild our industrial base.
Very true. Go on.
And that's a 10 or 15-year project,
yep.
just as it is for the United States. My main point, I would say, is you're exactly right. We should never be, as a nation, you should never be reliant on another nation for your security or for essential supplies. And there's always a tendency to kind of look, okay, we'll look at Europe, we'll look at the Commonwealth, we looked to the empire. You know, at some points you're going to be on your own, and you need to have a defence policy that recognises that. So NATO is done. That's over. So we need to say, well, do we really need a large conventional army? No, we don't, because we won't be fighting on the continent. We'll leave that fighting to other countries. What we need is to be a strong naval power and a strong aerospace power, be able to guarantee supplies can enter our country and that we can defend ourselves.
But just on that point, well, 2 points, Simon. Firstly, you say NATO's done. Are you of the opinion now? Have you drawn the conclusion that that's it? It is done. There's no going back. I mean, are you there?
I think it's been done for some time. You could make a case that it should have ended when the Berlin Wall came down. And it's been searching for a mission, and it's been used by various actors as a tool of international policy. But to be frank, it exposes this country to risks that it doesn't need to be exposed to. We don't need to fight a war with Russia if they invade the Baltic states, because if the Baltic states are Russian or they're independent, it makes no material difference to us as a country. Our politicians need to grow up. But the other thing I would say is people think this is being done out of arrogance by Trump. I don't think it is. I think this is being done out of fear. This is the sort of thing that Britain did before World War I and before World War II. We quietly occupied places like Ireland and things like that, Iceland, because we were afraid. And that's where Trump is now.
Well, so if you take a step back and look at the long sweep of geopolitics on this sort of stuff, Simon, it's nothing new what Trump's doing. People who have a meltdown over the fact that Trump is rapacious and mercantilist should just go back a few hundred years, look at the Monroe Doctrine, look at the Roosevelt Corollary, which was an extension of the Monroe Doctrine, which talked exactly about the Western Hemisphere and about Latin America, and Trump regards Greenland as part of his Western Hemisphere. And he is looking strategically. Yes, he wants the resources, but he also doesn't want China competing in his backyard at all. I mean, he's been very, very clear about that. And what people fail to understand is when you're talking about great powers, they do not want them rubbing up against each other. I mean, Simon, some people will find it deeply offensive what you've said about the fact that we should just roll over to the Russians if they want to take over Ukraine or the Baltic states. And they would say that the whole point of NATO was it was meant to act as a deterrent. Are you saying it's a paper tiger?
It has been. It's been a paper tiger since the year 2000 at least. And you have to be realistic. And the worst lies are the lies we tell ourselves. We told ourselves for 80 years we had a special relationship with the United States. Well, that was a lie. They robbed us blind during World War II. They forced us to sell the holdings of an empire over 2 years to provide us with arms. And they only introduced Lend-Lease when that money ran out. We've been, you and I have been repaying that war debt. So you have to be, this is a world of real politics. All that my feelings say we should do, this is morally wrong. This isn't about morality. It's what you can and cannot do militarily, industrially and economically. And we and Europe are so weak, we have no choice.
Thank you very much indeed, Simon. Appreciate your call. Alex in Edinburgh. Alex, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I think for once it's very important that we put our national self-interest, and in this instance that means striking a very delicate balance. I think that we should maintain our stance of publicly saying that we recognise Danish sovereignty over Greenland and it's up to the people of Greenland to decide their fate, but we should do no more beyond that. I don't think we should retaliate with tariffs, but in the background we should quietly acknowledge that the US is an unreliable ally and that we need to become far more independent.
So, Alex, this is interesting. So diplomatically what you're saying is make your protestations behind closed doors, but ultimately, Alex, if I understand you correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is if the US wants to acquire this either through a purchase of land, a la the Louisiana purchase, or through some sort of military intervention, which I don't think he wants to go down, but he might have to. You're saying that we should sit back and watch it happen. Is that what you're saying?
No, so I think people are perhaps being too hasty, because I think Trump lacks the domestic support to see this through. My understanding is that he currently does not have the power that he would need to seek from Congress to militarily take Greenland. And even when it comes to applying tariffs, he may have issues because that power does ultimately rest with Congress, even though it has partly been delegated. But still, there are a lot of Republicans who supported Trump on controversial issues in the past who it appears are not happy to throw their weight behind him on this issue. So I think for Britain, cool heads are needed. We maintain our public statement on Greenland, but we do not commit and say that we're going to retaliate with tariffs. And then quietly behind the scenes, we start to prepare ourselves for being more independent, looking at things like Trident.
Okay, well, that's a very good point on Trident, because a lot of the supplies and the servicing is done by the US, so we have to be mindful about that too. Alex, you're basically saying longer-term solution, in the short term, keep your counsel and apply pressure behind. I understand the strategy. Thank you. It's a clear one, an interesting one. Zach in Maidenhead, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ali. I think Trump has played a very clever move here. He knows we're in no position at all, from the military point of view. The Trident and the F-35 that we have bought, they're totally dependent on the USA. Same thing for many, many countries in Europe. He knows he just has to keep on pushing, and we will give up on Greenland because, number one, the pain we're not going to take. He's going to be under pain as well because he has to pay nearly $2 trillion in interest every year on his debt. Now, if we're smart and if we're united, we can get through it. Otherwise, we're going to have to take the pain any which way.
So when you say get through it, Zach, just explain what you mean. How are we going to get through it collectively? Please explain it.
In November, they will have midterm elections.
Yep.
Probability is he's not going to win. And that is the only thing that we can bank on at the moment, based on the current polls, current thinking, current discussions in the US. He hasn't got the backing from even his own Republican people at the moment. We know that. So the UK, what do? They can keep on protesting, but the reality is we are dependent on him, and he knows that. So he's a good poker player.
Okay, so Zach, so what you're saying, just to be clear, what you're saying is we are dependent on him. You're accepting that, but what you're saying is, let's just keep calm and hold our nose because the calculus and the equation domestically in the US could change, which might hamper him and clip his wings. Is that right?
That's number one. And number two, we've got to play the cards we have.
Yes.
Cards that we have is at the moment, if we are going to go and say we're going to, boycott the USA, which is probably a good idea, considering, we've joined him in the genocide in Gaza, we joined him in the overthrow in Venezuela, which are all illegal. We joined him on that. For whatever reason, we did. We supported him, we backed him, and unfortunately, this is what he does. Now, what do? We're going to have to, man up and say, we are going to do something economically, because that's the only way we will listen.
Well, that will be interesting. On the economic point, that will be interesting as to what they decide to do, because if they wanted to, they could play hardball economically. The reason why they haven't, and they didn't last year, is because they wanted the US to provide security guarantees on Ukraine. If those security guarantees aren't forthcoming...
Not going to happen.
Well, then, if they're not happening, and it doesn't look like they are, then maybe the Europeans, including the UK, should actually play economic hardball. Zach, thank you. Andrew in Halifax, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ali. Well, I think I very much agree with Alex in Edinburgh's argument that we should not retaliate and we should carry out quiet diplomacy from behind the scenes. But what I find very, very odious is the sheer hypocrisy that's coming out of both Europe and Britain with regard to Trump, whose actions, by the way, although I am normally a Trump fan, I am staunchly against.
What hypocrisy, Andrew?
Okay, well, first of all, you've got the EU rabbiting on about the state sovereignty and the preservation of state sovereignty. This is the same EU that demanded that we put a customs border down the Irish Sea and leave a part of this country effectively under large swathes of EU control in order to get a Brexit deal. That's Northern Ireland. On Gibraltar, Juncker quite clearly said that in the negotiations about Gibraltar, he would ensure that Spain would win. Those were his quotes. So the EU has absolutely no right to pontificate on about the sanctity of state sovereignty because they completely disregarded ours during the Brexit talks.
So where does it leave us, Andrew? If you're saying that we have a schism with the Europeans on this particular point, where does it leave us? Because, I mean, on our own, flapping in the wind, neither linked to Europe, and I'm not saying we should go back to Europe at all at this point, absolutely not. But even if we wanted to muck in with them from a trading point of view to apply tariffs and leverage and everything else, I mean, where does it leave us?
Well, I think it leaves us sitting in the corner because that's all we can do at the moment and doing what we are very good at. And that's not much these days. One of those is quiet diplomacy. And I think there should be a ramping up of that. But when Starmer talks about respecting the rights of Greenlanders, this is the guy who's completely disregarded the rights of Scotians to live under UK sovereignty. Again, another hypocrite.
That's a very interesting point. Andrew, thank you very much indeed. Farley says, we can't give Trump Greenland as that would be the same mistake as letting Russia have Crimea. Farley, please call in. Please genuinely call in and tell me what the serious options are. Because, you see, I don't want to denigrate your comment because I think it's heartfelt and it's an important comment and it's the same comment that European leaders, including our own leaders, making, right? But what does it actually mean in practice? Because the time for protestations is over. What we need now is action, and we need to decide what that action is. So you can throw your hands up and say, "Oh, this is not in line with my values. How could he be doing this? How could he?" Well, he is, and he's threatening that, and that's what's happening. So we can either bury our head in the sand like an ostrich, or we can sit up with calm heads and try and work out what on earth we're going to do. Mark in Plymouth, good afternoon.
Oh, hi. Yeah. What I'd like to say to Trump, or the countries that are threatened with the tariffs, is America's got dozens of military bases all over Europe, including some of the countries that he's threatened 25% tariffs on. So I would just say to them, well, you can't have your bases here anymore. And that's what makes America strong militarily, is that literally the spread.
Good point.
And your previous message just read out, that's exactly right with Trump. Because he isn't going to stop. He is a megalomaniac. And just picking up on a lot of points, I think for us to be out, we need NATO more than ever because the UK we just cannot provide the defence we need on our own. It's impossible. You need to be part of NATO.
But maybe, Mark, NATO's defunct and we have a European security alliance. Called something else.
Well, maybe, call it something else, but we need to work with Europeans, otherwise we're buggers.
No, I agree with you on that, and that's where I slightly disagree with Simon, my first caller. We're never going to be self-sufficient on our own to do everything. No. Even Simon was saying, look, focus on naval and aerospace, but he was saying ground troops. No, you need to collectively club together. I think if we find a values alignment with Europe, then we should go down that road, but I think NATO is looking increasingly defunct at the moment, quite honestly.
Yeah, we'll have to sort of reorganise it and set it up as something else. But I think a European army is the best way to go because in terms of cost, it makes such a saving.
Who thought we'd end up there? For years, that was a thing that was being touted as something we would never want to do as part of the whole Brexit thing. I mean, on the basis point, Mark, that is a killer point. You see, this is where the Europeans now need to decide, right, the US is not going to provide security guarantees to Ukraine, right? I haven't seen any of it yet. I mean, maybe they know something I don't. I doubt it, right? So if that's the case, cut them loose. Say, right, fine. We're gonna rapidly ramp up the economic pressure that we can, and we're gonna get your bases out of Europe. That's a good start. Let's play hardball with this guy to the extent that we can. Well, what can you do?
There's nothing else you can do.
But he respects hardball. But remember, the Chinese played hardball on him, and he backed down.
Exactly right. Yeah, I mean, he's like the bully in the playground, really, and you've got to stand up to him. Otherwise, he'll just carry on. You can't sort of pacify him. And I mean, the reason he wants Greenland, really, he's got all the defence he needs. It's just either vanity or minerals, or the two, really.
Well, and you've heard him say that leasing is not the same as owning. I understand the point he's making, but we are where we are. Mark, thank you. Okay, constructive. Penny, first-time caller in St Albans. Penny, welcome.
Thank you.
What would you like to say, Penny?
So I'd like to say everybody's talking about Europe and everybody's talking about America being the bully. But one of the other bigger partners of NATO is Turkey. They're self-sufficient. They have loads of army.
Good point.
They are absolutely brilliant. Well, they're second compared to America, aren't they, army-wise? So why is nobody talking to them? Why are we relying on this bully?
Well, the other thing...
It's time that we... Yeah. Well, as your previous caller said, we need to stand up to this bully. It's never going to stop.
But it's so interesting, Penny. It's so interesting because it takes me into a slightly related area. And sorry to digress, but you've sort of seduced me into this position with Turkey here. Turkey's being treated by the EU very, very badly, right? I mean, dangled along. And now we read, and it was in the FT Weekend front page yesterday, that the EU is having conversations about fast-tracking membership for Ukraine into Europe, which is getting up the noses of a lot of EU diplomats thinking, well, this isn't fair. How does this work? What precedents does this set? And a lot of people in Europe will be rather concerned about that. And the Turkey, who's been sucking up to the EU for years, has basically been shut out, largely because many EU states don't want a large Muslim country in Europe. That's the basic bottom line.
Which is absolutely ridiculous, because Turkey is firstly a secular country.
It is, but it's the truth, isn't it?
A Muslim country. And Ursula, I'll digress as well, the head of Europe went to Cyprus, which is a divided island, but only visited the south side, and was, we're really upset that the Greeks are suffering. Didn't actually go across the line to go to the other side and speak to Turkish Cypriots. So they are not making themselves, they're not doing themselves any favours by not talking to Turkey, because if they don't, America will, and if America and Turkey get together, we really do have problems.
I think that, you see, again, Penny, you're bringing in a different strand here, which is very helpful and important, because if we're going to be dealing with these really difficult, challenging issues, we need to think broadly, laterally, and not in the conventional way. The conventional thing has failed. I mean, the kaleidoscope has shattered, to quote Tony Blair, right? I mean, we're in a new world now. We need to think about a new approach. Penny, thank you. I think it's important you raised Turkey. I mean, it's a NATO country, treated very, very badly by the EU. I mean, the EU wants to rush in, literally, potentially rush Ukrainian membership of the EU. For what purpose, I do not know, right, after everything that's happened. But Turkey's languishing on the sidelines. Figure that one out. Louise and Billericay. Louise, good afternoon.
Hi, Ali. Happy New Year, belatedly to you.
Thank you so much, Louise. I hope you've been well. Lovely to hear from you. What would you like to say?
Yeah, God, do you know what, Ali? I feel like, do you remember that programme, The Tales of the Unexpected, or was it The Twilight Zone?
Yeah, it feels
Doesn't
like
it just feel like that? That you're living in a world that we used to read about?
Yeah.
But anyway, so I think the question is whether the remaining democracies are finally willing to outgrow dependence on any one US president, whether it's Trump or anybody else.
Yes, good point. Good point.
We've already seen the shape of the risk just in the last month, Ali. You know, I won't go over because you've already talked about a lot of what's happened. So it won't surprise you that I've been having a think about it, and I've got 6 points that I want to just go through.
I'm making notes, Louise. Go on.
So this one, I hope, has already happened. It's nearly a year since he was inaugurated. You've got to hope that the West has done a dependency audit, Ali, and worked out who has strengths in what areas where we are all reliant on the US that many of your callers have commented on. Munitions, air defence, cyber, satellites. And after that audit, that there is a crash reindustrialisation plan. So I'm going to be optimistic and hope that over the last 12 months, quietly in the background, some of this work has been going on, Ali. If it hasn't, that's very worrying, and they need to start immediately. The second point is we need a sort of, I've just called it a democratic security compact. So people have talked about the alliance of the EU, the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, you know, just all of the countries who have similar interests and are in similar positions, coordinating with defence and procurement, intel, etc. In terms of retaliation to these tariffs, Ali, I think this is an important one. We need trade retaliation as a bloc. It is no good. The reason that he throws his weight around is that he is this behemoth, right? It's no good France making a response, Germany making a response, Australia making a response. So we know now this wasn't a one-off. This is going to keep happening. So future threats like the Greenland tariffs hit a wall of unity fast.
Yep.
Because that is a way of standing up to the bully. I equally think it's really important that we change the dialogue, stop the sucking up now. Yep. I'm not saying go into conflict because we're dealing with a psychopathic toddler. Every answer that people are bringing up has to be couched in those terms, Ali. This is a lunatic.
Yeah.
So we need our leaders to start supporting the US guardrails, the courts, the watchdogs. We need two quick more.
Go on.
We need to contain the three strongmen carve-up where we've got Putin and Xi and Trump now. And we need to be working with non-aligned states and keep them engaged with credible economic offers. And the final point, and probably the most key point, is it's time to change the narrative discipline. Stop the performative flattery. Use calm, consistent language about sovereignty, rule of law, and proportional consequences, because we've got to stop acting like he's a normal person.
Okay, Louise, can you stop calling my show and coming out with ridiculously sensible suggestions, right? Because, every time you call in, I'm running out of jobs to give you. It was Health Secretary last time, it was Welfare Secretary the time before, now it's Foreign and Defence. Seriously, Louise, come on. This is, this is a very, very serious analysis you have provided. It is calm, very level-headed. And I think it actually, honestly, if Sir Keir Starmer's listening to this show on the way to Davos, he should actually take on board all of the points that you have made. I don't disagree with any of them. And I'm just going to run them through again because I think they're absolutely critical and fundamental. You said we need to do a dependency audit on our focus on where we're dependent on the US. Absolutely agree. We need to have a democratic security compact, you said, which is an alternative to NATO around states that we basically align with in terms of our outlook and values. Absolutely. We need to retaliate economically as a bloc, not on our own, but with Europe when it comes to tariffs and other things. No sucking up. And we need to have a containment strategy for the three strongmen, Putin, Xi and Trump, which would again focus partly militarily, partly economically. And finally, we need to have narrative discipline. Louise, I don't have anything more to say. It's a brilliant analysis. It's a kind of analysis I would have got at the LSE from one of my professors who thought about this very deeply. I have nothing more to say, Louise. Do you?
Wow. No.
But I really wish... Look, Louise, This is not the Louise Admiration Society. The point is that the points that you have made should be the kind of conversations we should be having seriously as a country, not just government, as a country. It's a collective issue here, rather than rattling our dummies saying, oh, he's been so mean and so horrible and he's going to take Greenland. It's not serious stuff.
And that's what I mean about it. It feels like we're living in a drama because we're not facing reality, Ali. We're not dealing with the reality. And what I tried to outline is the reality, and we've got to make grown-up choices. And I understand why people just were so shocked because it was such a unimaginable situation to find ourselves in. But in it we are, and now we need to wake up and act.
Thank you very much, Louise. Brilliant call. Honestly, Louise has come up with some good ideas. Penny came up with a Turkey point. I think some of my callers today are really on fire. Really, really on fire. Which gives me some hope that at least some people in this country are thinking in a hard-headed fashion about the gravity of situation, about the necessity and importance of rising to the moment and actually dealing with the fundamentals and thinking about the short, medium and long-term strategy that we need to employ to deal with this, rather than simply saying, what a nasty man, and putting a blimp in Trafalgar Square or Parliament Square. We're beyond blimps. This is serious stuff, for heaven's sake. Aaron in Bournemouth. Aaron, good afternoon.
Hi, Ali. Thanks for taking my call.
Pleasure.
I think a lot of this with Trump is about legacy. I mean, he's had his first shot at the White House. He's in his second term, and he's just picked up his FIFA medal. He's kind of managed to blag the Nobel medal from someone else who had it. And I think ultimately he's just trying to kind of define himself as the greatest president in his view ever.
What's wrong with that?
By taking territory, that's one of his views. But I think the way to kind of stop this, we've got to arm up militarily, but you've got to put the brakes on.
Yep.
I don't agree with Penny in drawing Turkey closer. I think Turkey is a bad partner of NATO. I mean, we've got to look at 10,000 odd incursions into Greek airspace. We've got to look at the fact that they've been occupying Cyprus for the last 50 years. They tried to stop Finland and Sweden joining NATO. They're sponsors of Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. I don't think, turning our back on America and looking to Turkey as the way forward. So I think you've just got to put the brakes on America as much as possible. I mean, we put the brakes on Turkey in terms of accession. Why can't the EU try and do that with America?
So, Aaron, okay, fine. It's a strategy. Now, the brakes on. What does putting the brakes on as much as possible mean practically?
Well, I think it's recognising that you understand some of America's concerns, but saying this isn't the way to go about it. I mean, there has to be another way forward rather than taking the territory.
Well, what if there isn't, Aaron? What if there isn't? This is the problem, right? You've got to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. I mean, we're not preparing for the worst at all. We're just hoping and flapping around in the wind.
No, absolutely. And, it's really sad. I live on the south coast of England. We've got a great heritage down here in terms of, Southampton, Portsmouth, over towards Poole, in terms of communications and military and so on. And we need to be, taking a look at and taking stock of what we do down here, because, as one caller said, taking 10 to 15 years to basically get our industrial base up, it has to happen quicker than that. But our problem is our leadership, unfortunately.
But Aaron, it's not our leadership. I'm not going to blame the leadership here. I'm going to blame all of us. Because all of us have been living in cloud cuckoo land. You can only blame leaders reflect the will of the people and public opinion, right? True leaders shape it, but we haven't had true leaders since probably Margaret Thatcher. Even Tony Blair, right? So I'm not saying that, I'm just stating a thing. Therefore, it's incumbent on all of us to have this conversation about what we want and how we're going to reindustrialise, because it is going to involve adjustment. And it is also going to, if we're going to spend more on preparing for warfare, it is also going to mean adjustments in what we can spend in other areas where we currently have spending, be that welfare, be that the NHS, be that other areas. We have to understand the gravity of the moment. And I don't think, honestly, people on my show do, because I think we're hearing some amazing calls. I just don't think that generally as a populace we're there. Aaron, thank you. I think it's an important contribution. Rod in Barnet, good afternoon.
Yeah, nice to speak to you, Ali. A lot of great callers today. So I've got a few points I'd like to say.
Please.
So look, the world order has and continues to shift, okay? And Europe becomes a smaller part in that world order. Okay, Turkey may be a liberal state, as one of your callers said, but I don't think they can be trusted because they align with some terror states.
Okay.
Another one of your callers mentions genocide. We keep going back to Israel and the Palestine and the genocide. I want to look at this objectively. If people talk about Israel dropping 200,000 bombs on such a small area, if each bomb kills one person only, that's 200,000 deaths. And if we say 50% of Israel's bombs don't kill anybody, so that's 100,000 people, and each bomb kills 2 people, that's still 200,000 people, okay? Now, 70,000 people in Gaza have been killed.
Okay, but Rod, how is that relating to what we're talking about here? Please bring it back to the thing.
Because they align themselves with the likes of Iran, and Turkey, I believe, does as well. So that is one axis, and you've got the Chinese who are sitting in the middle, and then you've different axes. And I believe Trump needs to take Greenland because he's the only power that has the strength to do it. We're weak as Europe. We can't make decisions. We're not very strong.
Okay, understand you think he needs to take Greenland. Fine. A lot of people will find it abhorrent, but I do understand the strategic rationale for why he's doing it. Fair enough. I don't agree.
And it's long-term.
It's long-term, you know, it is long-term thinking, which is actually quite rare for a Democrat, for a president who's in a democracy to think long-term, because he's only got 4 years to do this. Whereas Xi and Putin have the luxury of being dictators, so they don't have to worry about this sort of stuff. Where does it leave Europe, though, Rod? Where does it leave us?
We're nobody. We're nobody. We're led. We're weak. We're military power together. We're nothing. Who's leading?
Okay,
it's the Americans.
Okay, but then so then, Rod, what's the policy response? Is the policy response to perpetually roll over, or is it to actually say, okay, we've now been taught our lesson again and again and again. We now need to grasp the nettle. I'm mixing all sorts of metaphors, but you get the point. And actually arm up. I mean, what's the response, and when should this response take place?
Personally, I think what needs to happen is I think Europe needs to be the military power on Greenland, but I think it needs to be controlled by America.
Well,
it's the entrance to Europe, and it's the entrance from Europe into America. So, you know, he's not stupid, because we've got big problems and they're getting worse and worse.
I don't think he is stupid. I mean, the counter-argument is that under the treaty that was signed some decades ago, he can put as many troops as he wants on Greenland, and Greenland's not going to say anything about it, nor is the Danish government. However, he regards ownership as better than leasing, and he wants the land, and he wants it for posterity, and that's fine. And look, he
sees Europe falling to fundamentalist Islam.
Well, he does see that too, and he and J.D. Vance have both said that. So if anyone thinks that this is a flash in the pan and we should hold our nose till November or even till the end of this presidency and everything will revert back to the mean, I'm not sure that that's a sensible policy at all. Rod, thank you.
Yeah, so I think there's one area where we need to be a lot less squeamish in Europe, because the US is a deeply transactional system in the way it does its politics. Yes. And a lot of countries are able to get their case across, like Israel, the UAE, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, through simple bribery, to be quite honest, through their lobbying links. And that's absolutely fine, because their system allows for it. And I know it offends our democratic values in terms of how we do our politics here, but if we want influence, we have to buy a seat at the table, and that's how their system works. And to be honest, we know that, for instance, even with the Brazilian tariffs on Bolsonaro, there were certain Republican senators that were prepared to cross the floor to say, these tariffs are unacceptable, and we need to do the same. And our system, we can wait for defence expenditure to rise, but that will take years. But that's something that we can do credibly now and give money into that system.
So what you're saying, Milo, is we should set up a British Public Affairs Committee that goes and basically supports certain senators and congressmen who we think are sympathetic to Britain's values and European values, and basically fund them.
Yes. I mean,
it's an interesting other strand to the approach. Yes.
Well, I mean, the advantage of it is it's immediate, and it hits him hard, because if he can't deliver his legislative program without giving guarantees in other areas, he's done for, and he doesn't want to be a lame-duck president for the remaining 2 to 3 years of his presidency. So that's the way you've got to go.
Interesting.
Hit him where it hurts.
Thank you very much. That was another strand brought in by Milo. Very, very interesting.